Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Sultana Nosrati, and today's topic is going to be all about decisions or behaviors, depending on what you want to call it. So, one of the things I really cover a lot when I talk about cognitive behavioral therapy is the two things we control. The only two things we actually control in our life, one of which is your thoughts and perceptions, but that's for another time. And the other is your behaviors, i.e., the decisions that you make on a daily basis. Um, when I say it's the only thing that you can control, a lot of people are like, wait a minute, no. That's not how life works out. I had a choice to make. I had no choice. I had to do this. And so somebody once told me, what if someone puts a gun to your head? Then what do you do? Well, the fact is you still have a decision to make. While someone can put a gun to your head, they can't make you get in the car, so to speak. That's something that only you can decide. That's something only you can choose. In fact, what we know is that if someone puts a gun to your head and says, get in the car, the best thing for you to do is to not get in the car because, that's the last time someone's ever going to hear of you. The thing to do is to say, no, I'm not going to get in the car. At that point, it's up to somebody else to make a decision, i.e. the person holding the gun, as to whether they're going to force the issue or not. But ultimately, no one can make you do something you don't want to do. Another really great example that I use all the time is I got up this morning and I didn't want to go to work. If I didn't want to go to work, my boss is not going to come to my house and make me get dressed and go to work. That is my choice. I either choose to go to work today or I don't. The thing that my supervisor can do as a result of me choosing not to go to work is she can fire me, right? Once I make my choice, I don't have a say about how the other person is going to react. Does that make sense? So choices, decisions, behaviors, those are things that you do have 100% control over. You just don't get to control the results. What I want to talk about when it comes to decisions is the difference between a mistake and a decision. So oftentimes things don't work out and you hear people say, oh, I made a mistake. It was just a mistake. Well, I kind of want to make a fine-tuned point here. The thing is that a decision is something that you decide you're either going to do or not do. A mistake is a decision that you make based on not having enough information. So say I say to people, my name is Sultana, and they're like, oh, Sultana, and I'm like, no, it's Sultana, and they're like, my mistake. Yes, that's a mistake. You didn't know any better. Oftentimes the decisions that we make is what we feel we must do, but we do have the information. So it's not a mistake. It's a decision. It's a decision that just didn't work out in our best interest. That's the only difference. So why is that important? Why is that an important distinction for me to make? It's important to take ownership of the things that we choose to do or choose not to do, i.e. me choosing not to get up and go to work. Because it indicates that you have a positive and a strong internal locus of control. What that means is that you take ownership for you, and as a result, you're less likely to experience a sense of depression, anxiety, or anger. Why? Well, when you take ownership of your decisions and you realize that you made this decision that led to this result, then you don't feel hopeless. You might be disappointed at the way things worked out or you didn't like the way it panned out, but you acknowledge to yourself that you are responsible for this. People who feel like they are responsible and that they have ownership of their own life tend to have a very high internal locus of control and a low external locus of control. That's that sense that someone else is leading or driving the path, right? That means that they feel less in control of their lives and as a result feel more depressed and anxious because that's where anxiety, depression, and anger breeds, right? So that's why that's important. Now, going back to behaviors and decisions, like the gun example, that's kind of a rock and a hard place kind of situation. And the reason that that's really difficult for a lot of people is partially because when we were young, our parents told us that decisions are between good and bad. You have good decisions and you have bad decisions. Don't run out in the street. That's bad. So walking in the sidewalk is good. It's important that parents do this for us because when we're young, we struggle to understand gray areas. And so we need to understand that there's a good and a bad. And there's gives us a sense of security and purpose, right? The problem is as we get older, if you're older than, I don't know, 6 years old and listening to this video, you know that life is full of, well, decisions. That means decisions that leave you between bad and cluster F, as I put it. It's not good and bad, it's often bad and cluster F. I'll give you an example. So when I used to work in California, I was an advocate for a domestic violence team. And what we did is we would walk into a person's house after the black and white cars where the officers would make the scene safe. And I would come in and part of my job would be to help differentiate between who the victim and who the perpetrator was, and then advocate for the victim. And I remember I walked into this gorgeous house in San Fernando Valley, and the young woman, she must have been like 23 or 24. She had like a 2-year-old son with her, and she had these marks on her neck. And I remember thinking, "Ooh, that good thing someone called the cops." And so I remember talking to her and I said, you need to leave. You really need to leave. And she says to me, "You don't understand. I have married this man from the time I was 18. I've only ever known this marriage or my parents' house. I have a young child. I've never worked. If I leave, I have no way of supporting my child and I'll be homeless." And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, that's really bad. Dead is worse. And since he's already put his fingers around your throat, chances are dead is where you're heading." So you can see how bad and clusterfuck can be somewhat similar at onset, right? So how do you choose? Well, it's really important to note that you don't look at just what's happening right now. You have to look at the short-term consequences, but also the long-term consequences. And one of my best tricks to figuring out the difference between good decisions and cluster F decisions is cluster F is always easier. See, in the case of my patient, is not leaving was the easier thing for her to do, but it was actually the cluster F decision. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. So again, looking at the short-term versus long-term consequences. In the case of me not wanting to get up and go to work that day, short-term, that feels so much better to just stay in bed, sleep in, cuddle, right? But long-term consequences, I might lose my job as a result, which nobody wants. So I have to take ownership first. And I have to understand that my decisions have short and long-term consequences. So what do you do if you thought you analyzed the situation correctly, you made a decision based on what you thought was right, and you ended up in a cluster F situation anyway, right? Well, the best thing to do at that moment is what I tell most of my patients to do when they find themselves in an uncomfortable situation, dealing with an uncomfortable feeling. Have some acknowledgement. Acknowledge that the situation sucks and it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, and that's not exactly how you hoped it would. Have some compassion, not empathy, not, "Oh, feel sorry for me," but more like, okay, anyone ending up in this situation is not going to feel good about it, and you're going to feel bad, and let's see what we could do from here on out. Compassion. Understand that if you were in that person's shoes, or if the loved one was in your shoes, you would have some compassion for them. So it's important to be fair, not cruel. Acknowledge that the decision that you made didn't work out the best way that you hoped it would, without telling yourself, "Oh, how stupid could I have been," because we are human. And sometimes even the best laid plans don't work out the way we hoped. Sometimes the decisions we made, choosing cluster F because it was easier, end up as a bigger cluster F than we'd thought it would. And so at that moment in time, it's not helpful to say, "How stupid could I have been?" What's more helpful is to say, "This is where I'm at. I made a decision that put me here. Now what? Now what can I do?" And when I say, "Now what can I do?" I want you to think about something that is helpful and truthful, something you can actually do something about. In other words, keep moving forward. I tell my patients all the time, if you find yourself in the middle of hell, do not sit down and have a picnic with table and chairs. What you want to do is you want to take one step in front of the other and keep moving. If all you can do that day is crawl an inch, at least you crawled an inch. And eventually you'll find yourself out of hell if you just keep walking. So the point of this whole discussion is to not just make you feel like, oh gosh, I did a bad thing and now I deserve to be punished for it forever. No, it just means that A, it's important to be accountable for the decisions that you make. Understand that that is something you do control. What you do or don't do is something that you control. And two, even when they turn out bad, you can still move forward and learn. Learn from from the mistakes that you made before, and I promise it does get better. Finally, the reason I chose to do this is last year was full of iffy decisions, I think, on all of our parts. I'm hoping that this year, 2021, is a better year for all of us. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.